sell a bit harder. The people can take sales, I think basically you can take sales. So can't you folks? Can you not take sales? I think you can. You actually miss selling. So you're going to get a bit of it today. No, welcome everybody to Brain Food Live on Air. It's episode 273, bringing it to you every Friday, no fail. I am super excited to be having this conversation with you today, which I know you think is facetious because it's about EU and compliance and AI acts and all this, but I am genuinely interested in this topic. As well as I'm very, very interested to learn from the experts that we have coming onto the panel to discuss with us on this hugely important topic. So it is about the EU AI Act, implications for recruiters, TA, and HR. Hopefully you've signed in to the right place and you're able to watch it okay. Okay, firstly, let's do some sound checks. I want to make sure everyone can hear me okay before we get into the conversation. Everyone on Crowdcast, if you can hear me okay, let me know in the chat. Audio, visual, you should see me, you should see Chloe here, first time sort of on the Brain Food Live. So welcome to Chloe. And we also should be live streaming this, folks, on various LinkedIn. So if you're watching this on my LinkedIn, do let me know whether you can hear me okay. We should also be powering this out on TextKernel's company page. So if you're watching it on there, do drop us a line. And I believe a few of the people are also live streaming this as well, including one of our guests. Okay, loud and clear, it seems. Everyone's saying it's loud and clear. Awesome. Well, firstly, let me say hello to our wonderful co-host today, Chloe Shoebridge, I think it is, isn't it? Sure.
Yes.
How do you pronounce your second name? I think we've gone beyond second name. Shoebridge? Okay.
No, yes, that's it.
Who are you, Chloe? Tell us who you are and what it is you do.
So I'm the marketing manager at TextKernel. We've also recently just been acquired by Bullhorn. That news came out in June, which was very exciting and also very relatable to this topic with our AI strategy. And with their AI strategy, I think it's a match made in heaven. So we're really excited. And the reason why I'm really excited about this specific topic and theme is because at TextKernel, we are the members and contributors to the Royal Standardization Institute, so specifically the Committee for AI and Big Data. So we're really, at the end of it, helping shape the standards that how organizations implement the AI Act in practice. So I'll let my colleagues Jaap and Vincent speak more about that, but it's really something that we have always been doing, and we champion responsible AI into all our products and solutions, from document understanding to search and match. Really, responsible AI is ingrained in everything we do. So it's a really exciting topic for us.
No, that's fantastic. And also, TextKernel, if folks who don't know, TextKernel's business is all about sort of data. And so this is a business that's basically been, pretty much, it has to be very, very tightly in compliance with what's happening in legislation. So no better organization to really support the show and also to bring on some legal expertise from the team as well. And by the way, we've got loads of people from South Africa tuning in. Hello, Norm. Hello, Vanessa. We're picking up this, Chloe, of course, from South Africa. And so yeah, it's fantastic stuff. Let's talk about the newsletter, Chloe. Did you read it last week, and what was interesting?
I did. I really found the LinkedIn article interesting about the different predictions. And out of all the articles shared, so much about AI was coming up, generative AI being more and more exciting and being more used within the recruitment industry. So I thought it was really interesting to see people are getting more excited about it and utilizing it more. Also figuring out where to use it and where not to.
Yeah, this is the future of recruiting talent solutions thing, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
LinkedIn, I don't know whether people know, but LinkedIn basically have kind of obviously a number of different divisions, but I think they've got different content divisions for those divisions. And the talent solutions part actually is one of the better ones. because they do produce some really interesting information, some great interviews as well. And I particularly like the chart where they sort of it kind of gives TA a bit of a future vision. Like, what is the role? It's actually maybe to help other organizations think about how AI should be applied into different functions as well. Because of legislation like this, but also about how do we keep the human experience core to what we're doing. So I've just shared it in the chat there. Check it out if you haven't already. What else is interesting, Chloe?
I think there was, I can't remember what the author's name was, but talking about a new way of sourcing and going back into traditional methods, because everything is becoming inundated with generative AI and automated communication, where recruiters are now going back to networking, meeting at conferences, making more personalized outreach, but understanding the balance between, we still need to automate some of our processes so we can free up time for the more important work, but where does that balance between technology and humans lie? So I thought that was really quite profound. I think that's also something we at TechScreen also believe. AI is there to help you, not do all the work for you.
Yeah, it was a really interesting post by a guy called Toby Culshaw. He's the guy that is organizing the event you're at next week. You know, the talent intelligence thing in Amsterdam. I do believe that's Toby's event. But anyway, he wrote that, and he's not a sourcer, so he's like stepping well outside of his like comfort zone. So I was a bit skeptical, I got to be honest, when I first saw him post this. But I read it and I thought, you know what, he's probably got something here. And the bottom line on this, folks, is that he's saying that because AI will get dominant in terms of the communication, what's going to be the differentiating factor is just the weird things that human beings do. And I'm very much aligned with this. This is what I'm calling kind of being conspicuously human, and also something that Peter Hinson talks about, the human premium, which is we're going to actually look for evidence of humanity from the communication before we even pay attention to it, because if we think it's automated or driven, we're going to just zone out and not listen to it at all. I don't actually, Chloe, whether you've received any messages that you've identified as maybe that's being just like generated out. I mean, has that happened to you in any way, or what's your sort of personal view in it?
I'm trying to think, but I think there's been one or two, and I called it out because they had got my name wrong, or they had copied a line in from ChatGPT that was probably a bit of a mistake. But I have seen a few things that come through, and I'm a bit more skeptical. But it hasn't happened that often. But we've heard talks about it. So, but even the automated outreach, I think, coming back to the act and compliance, what about data privacy and keeping in the rules now? And there's not just GDPR. There's now the EU AI Act. So where do we draw the line, and where's that going to go?
I want to ask the audience this question, actually. Automated outreach, personalized automated outreach. That's the thing about this. We've got AI now that can look at individuals' online profiles, let's say it's on LinkedIn, and they could personalize a message to that person at scale. Even LinkedIn's promoting this at you. Would you rewrite your message via AI and all this stuff? Do you think that is compliant with the EU AI Act? Do you think it's compliant with GDPR? Let us know in the comments what you think. Because I personally, when I think about it, I actually am not sure. So I want to know what you think about this. No, Bob, it's like direct out. There's no such thing as formal procedure here in Bring Food Live. You know, it's like yeah, he'll boomerang back. He's got nothing to do with his Fridays, so he'll be back at some point. Anyway, right, give us one more before we get into this topic, Chloe. One more thing that was interesting last week.
I think just the I think it was the last article, and I didn't read too much into it, but the retirement age for China has now increased, especially for women. I don't know too much about that region, so it was quite interesting to see why they lowered and the different levels they lowered at, or make it a little bit higher.
Every country is raising retirement age, isn't that right? I mean, we've seen France do it. I don't know what's happening in the Netherlands. I mean, is there any talk about the retirement age over there at this point?
Good question.
Maybe not. Well, it's good that you don't know, Chloe. You're well away from it. But yeah, really interesting. I didn't even realize, but China has not increased its retirement age since the 1950s. And so they've got this like ridiculously early retirement age. I didn't realize women retire at 50. And men retire at something like 60, like really early. But anyway, they're bumping it all up. And one thing was very interesting is that there's still a big gender gap. So men still have a much longer working life. Women are still going to retire about 10 years earlier. But they do a working class, sort of a blue collar, white collar split. So if you work in manual labor, you actually retire earlier. If you do white collar, you actually can work a little bit longer. So yeah, really, really interesting. And a little tidbit, because I spoke to a friend of mine who's actually relocated from Shanghai to the UK. Hello, Anne-Marie. And I hope she doesn't mind me saying this, but she believes that she was mandatorily retired in her business because of the retirement age is so young, so early, that some corps can actually use it to get rid of staff or to basically remove experienced, therefore more expensive staff. And so there's that cycling going on. But yeah, fascinating spot. But anyway, interesting to do this. Loads of interesting things happening all over the world in terms of what we're doing with retirement in general. Anyway, very, very good. Let's roll on to this topic. Folks, if you have any questions for our panelists, pop them in the Q&A function at the right-hand sidebar here. Some of you might have come in with preloaded questions. I'm sure you've had all of this stuff. So get them in there now, because I'm going to go to it at the end of the show. What I'm going to do when I bring the experts on is we're going to just go through what the main principles of the AI Act are, and then try and extrapolate from there. So let's bring these folks on. I see Martin commentating, so let's bring Martin on straight away. We have Jaap. I think Jaap is here, isn't he?
Yes.
And we have Vincent. Is Vincent here also? Do I see him? Let's see if I can get him. So what's particularly interesting? I think Thibaut is here as well. Let me just bring on everyone. Let's see what we do. Oh, there's Martin. Hello, Martin.
Hi.
Everybody, how are you?
Very well.
Good to see you, Martin.
Good to be here.
Martin, you're very welcome. Whilst we're getting everyone on, would you like to introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do, Martin?
Sure. My name is Martin Woodward. I'm with Randstad, the world's largest HR services company. I'm part of their global legal team, and among others, I'm responsible for our responsible AI program.
Fantastic stuff. Nice. Great to have you on the show, Martin. We have, who else we've got? We've got Jaap here as well. Jaap, why don't you quickly introduce yourself for you? What it is you do, sir?
Yeah, hi all. I'm Jaap Kersten. I'm the International Legal Counsel at TextKernel. I've been doing that for 2 years, and I am the only legal counsel, so I am involved in everything that comes along legal-wise. So that also is the implementation of the EU AI Act. Before joining TextKernel, I was working at the University of Amsterdam and doing research contracts on the field of AR.
Fantastic stuff. Thank you. Very, very good to see you here, Jaap. We also have Vincent here as well. Vincent, wonderful to see you. Can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Yes, absolutely. My name is Vincent. I work as a team lead in the R&D team at TextKernel, which means I have a technical background. So we are basically the team that builds TextKernel's search and match technology. And therefore, the AI Act and responsible AI is of great importance to our team. So in that role, I support Jaap and others to make sure we remain compliant.
Fantastic stuff. And we have Thibaut Allah here as well. Thibaut, wonderful to see you. Can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Sure. Hey, everyone. Thanks for the invitation. So I work at Smart Recruiters since 2 years now, working on privacy and now on the EU AI Act and other regulations. So I don't know if you are all familiar with Smart Recruiters, but we are selling an ITS, but my opinions are only engaging myself.
Yeah, very, very smart to put that caveat in, Thibaut. I like it. Personal opinions only here, by the way, folks. Okay, let's put that like as a general caveat to cover everybody. Okay, cool. EU AI Act. What are the key things? Like, is there now consensus amongst the kind of expert opinion as to what it means? Because it's been floating around. We've seen the publication. It's in the law now. Like, are there any areas where actually there's still huge disputes, or are there sort of some crystallized things where, okay, we understand what the act means on this point? Where are we in terms of legal consensus, folks? Anybody want to start us off with that question?
I think, I can sort of kick in and you can pick up from here, Jaap, as well.
Yeah, sure.
I think everybody agrees, we have an AI Act because it took forever to actually, get into law. It entered into force on sort of the 1st of August. So it's live, and depending on sort of what kind of AI systems and what parts of the law, bits of it will actually enter into force over the next 3 years. So the main thing that in our industry we're looking at is sort of systems used for selection and recruitment, HR decision making, and access to training and skilling. Those bits will roughly come into force in about 2 years from now. So the likes of Jaap and myself and our organizations are really sort of working very hard to kind of meet those deadlines. As to sort of like the controversial bits, there's plenty of areas where people have all sorts of discussions. I think the main challenge a lot of us are facing is that it's very much a framework legislation that's left a lot of openings for further, as they call it, like delegated acts by the European Commission and others, and for all sorts of technical standards to come into force that actually give shape to the requirements that, Jaap's business and our business need to meet. And none of those are available yet. And that's the hardship we're dealing with at the moment. So, if I come and am asked to advise some of our build systems who work on some of our AI systems, let's call, for example, our search and match algorithm, and it's incredibly hard at this moment to give them very different, dedicated build requirements because they're simply not yet available. And hopefully they will be, within the next 2 years. But I'm also understanding that this sort of standardization process is not going very quickly.
Okay, so let's start with this. So basically, in layman's terms, what you're saying is we have this sort of broad framework, which kind of gives a sense of direction of travel. There's some key components associated with it, but in terms of how it kind of manifests, that's currently unclear, and we're waiting for what exactly? Like more legislation at the EU level, or more legislation at the national level? Like who are we waiting for, I guess, is the question.
I can jump in here if you want. So that's exactly what Martin mentioned. We're waiting for standardization, and actually we are contributing to the standardization because the framework itself doesn't specify exact levels of trustworthiness. It just specifies, for example, it says your systems can not have an unacceptable amount of bias. Right, that's all it says. It doesn't say this percentage of bias, or these metrics you need to use. That is something that will follow when we have these standards, which have a very clear definition of how do we measure bias. What is bias? Let's start with that question, because that's even something that you can debate about. And to what level is bias acceptable in your systems?
Who's actually working on this? Is there an identifiable body that produces these frameworks? Someone's nodding. Thibaut, who are these people?
Yeah, the AI office is being created by the EU Commission, and also the EU Commission will propose some guidelines and adapt also some technicals, let's say, approach to safeguard rails. And after it will be technical, but they will precise and modify also the text. They have the right to modify some part of the text.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, sorry, just to sort of jump in there, indeed, sort of the European Commission doing one bit, the other one, you have sort of a European standardization sort of institutes and Senelec. They're developing a lot of these standards with the input of sort of the 27 member states' own kind of standardization institutes, like then in the Netherlands. And, you know, they're basically working according to what they call the kind of the Swedish consensus model. So there's a lot of discussion until everybody agrees. So it's going to take a little while.
Yep. Very, very interesting. Okay, so I think that's a very good overview as to the current state. So we have the law. It's basically, here's the framework. It's a little bit ambiguous what it means for product makers. Would it be fair to say that some product makers may be very hesitant to roll things out because they need to rebuild it? Or do you think product makers are just rolling stuff out now with the view that they may need to withdraw it from market?
I think the latter is the case. So people are rolling stuff out as fast as they can now.
I'm pro rolling out. Let's go.
Or maybe it was even before the 1st of August, because then the AI Act wasn't a law. And that would maybe have given them some more time to roll it out before laws actually in place. And now within the coming 24 months, when it comes into fully enforced, I'm expecting a lot of people to roll out products as fast as they can to have it out there and see how they get compliant afterwards. And I don't think that's a good way of working, actually. I'm not in favor of that.
You're not in favor. Why are you? This sounds like a great idea, though, Jaap. Like, why have you got a problem with this? Like, just shove it out there. If there's a problem, then you correct it back. You know, maybe there's a period of grace where you can say, okay, you know, you didn't give us the framework. What do you want me to do? Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah, the damage may already have been done, it's always good to think about what you're doing in front and take a responsible approach and make sure that you know what you are actually doing. If you just throw anything out there, especially with AI, this may have consequences that you did not think of before, and that cannot be undone.
Yeah, I'm with Jaap on this one. I mean, we can't forget that we're sort of using a lot of technology to determine whether people are eligible for a job and therefore whether they're able to create a livelihood for themselves, right? So, you know, these are one of the areas, if you just sort of take maybe your corporate hat off and you put sort of your private hat off, if you're applying for a job, you want the best possible shot at that. And if, you know, a faulty AI system for whatever reason incorrectly passes my CV and it doesn't pick up on the right skills and I sort of, you know, get kicked out in the first round, that has significant influences on my life, my family's life, the ability that I have to provide for sort of my family, my children. So, you know, it makes sense from that perspective to be, you know, careful with deployment of AI systems here. So in that sense, I'm very much supportive of Jaap's position here.
And there have been many situations before with way less powerful algorithms that had a major effect on people's life and ruined people's life. And now we are dealing with AI that is stronger than ever. So the consequences will be stronger than ever as well.
So this is a powerful argument, guys. I mean, I totally respect this. However, I think Vincent actually wants to disagree. If that's the case, just step right in.
I want to add that this is not just about the legislation, because the legislation embodies the principles of responsible AI, right? That's what it tries to capture in laws, which, you know, it does successfully to a certain degree. That's something we can discuss, but it's about being ethical with AI. That's really at the core of this law, and so kind of the pushing stuff out there and then see what happens with this legislation. It goes very much against the spirit of the legislation, of course.
All right, so Thibaut, you want to say something? Just interrupt, man. Go ahead.
Yeah, because I agree with you all, but AI is not so new, and the law was before on this point, and the Article 22 of GDPR was saying that you have the right not to be object of an automated decision making, and it was touching the TA AI. And now we have a new brand, new law AI, and AI booming in TA for sure, but it was already here before, so it's not so new, this point.
So I would put a counterpoint to all of this, and I think you're right. No one wants to do AI that creates, let's say, unfair outcomes for anybody. I think no one wants this. But I think the guy here, someone in the comment mentioned something basically more succinctly than me, which is the current system we have, whether AI or not, is also producing unfair outcomes. So if it is the case that you bring in a technology or some sort of innovation that, yes, is not perfect, but may actually improve on aggregate the amount of right outcomes, shouldn't we just push ahead with that, even if, you know, there's going to be scenarios where, okay, someone is going to be unjustly treated, but currently, as we're speaking, we know there's loads of people being unjustly treated. So I think there's a powerful sort of argument pro, but I do believe that the EU probably is generally more cautious in positioning than other legislative areas, so to say. Let's accelerate a few innovations that I'm seeing in technology.
Yeah, but maybe, sorry to interrupt, but maybe just to sort of clarify at least one area that seems to sometimes be misinterpreted. Like the AI Act, other than sort of 7 or 8 very distinct cases, including sort of emotion interference at the workplace, is not going to prohibit any AI. It just means that if you have a high-risk system, and, you know, for the reasons that I painted earlier, sort of systems around, you know, HR decisions and recruitment and selection are considered high-risk, it just basically means you have to jump through a couple of extra hoops to make sure that your product actually does what it says on the tin. But after you've gone through those hoops, you can still very much release it on the market. You know, it's not going to put an X through a whole bunch of sort of, you know, already fairly responsibly developed AI in our industry. And I think that's a big misunderstanding. People maybe think that a lot of it is going to disappear or its use is going to be curtailed. No. I mean, you have to meet certain requirements. That's also why, I mean, you know, this is product safety legislation. You know, think like the way we've legislated aviation. I mean, you know, the whole idea of all climbing on board of a metal tube and rocket it through the sky at like 1,000 kilometers per hour is ridiculous unless you put all sorts of, you know, safeguards in place that happens super safely. And that's the exact same, you know, sort of direction of travel that the EU is proposing for AI. This is a very powerful technology. We want to see that innovation. We want to see it used for good. But the only way to make sure that it's used for good is to sort of get a few rules in place.
Okay, I think that's great. We're going to have to come back to this point, Martin, because I want to talk about what exactly the other responsibilities and requirements for the product makers. So if I don't come back to that, do remind me, everyone. But there's a few things that have emerged in terms of the product sort of and the product landscape that I've observed, and I'm thinking, I ain't sure whether that's in or out in terms of compliance. So I'm thinking people are shoving stuff out. So I want to put it to everyone here in the panel. Like, what do you think about the general idea? For instance, I'm seeing a lot of like AI screening loads of CVs, for instance. I'm getting 100 CVs through my inbox. I can't read all of that. You know what? AI assistant, you just surface me up 5 candidates that meet the job description. How is that in or out of compliance as it currently stands, as far as you know, folks? Anybody want to say?
Compliance is not just really about use cases. I think it's more about how you do that. So I think you can build a very compliant system to do that. I also think you can, well, have a very irresponsible system to do the same thing. So I wouldn't draw that line between use cases. I would draw that line between the approach,
the manner of doing it, right? The manner of doing the sorting. So let's dive in just one layer deeper on this then. What is a non-compliant way of sorting candidates? So I've got 100 people. I'm going to surface up 5. What is a non-compliant way, and what is a better way?
Automatically rejecting people for his name, for his skin color, stuff like this. And you could configure an AI system, badly configured, but you could do it. And this would be absolutely uncompliant. But you are touching a point that is, for me, in the void of the law and making the bridge between the GDPR and the AI Act, because I'm defending a software that is screening CVs. And also it depends on your data set, because when you give CV, you have a lot of personal data. Basically, you have the whole life of the candidate. So are you compliant, first of all, with the GDPR, because there is personal data? And after, how do you ensure the human oversight? Is the recruiter taking the decision? And it was a huge void around here, because at the end, for example, I give 5 stars to a candidate and 1 star to a candidate. Obviously, if I'm a recruiter, I will pick the 5-star candidate. So the factor of the technology nudged me so far that, okay, I am taking the decision naturally, but in fact, the technology eliminated the candidate with 1 star. So it's how do you communicate it? Do you send after the review of the ranking of the candidate? Does the candidate understand why he's having only 1 star? Are you discussing with it? Do you allow him to have a second review by a human? This is the spirit of the law, in my opinion.
Yeah, you made a very interesting point, Thibaut. Like the idea that the human should be the final adjudicator, I think, is a bit of a cop out, if I can use like layman's terms, in the sense that a human's never going to veto the AI. You know, it's like AI is going to tell me the 5 best. I'm not going to look at the bottom 5. You know, I'm busy. I'm going to go to the top 5. So just forcing me to then do something when I'm just going to accept the top 5 is just basically a cop out. But anyway, maybe that's what we've got to do. But you're saying this is okay so long as you then provision something for the candidate to maybe argue back, or maybe they get access to why the ranking is this way, something like this. Is that how a product maker will be able to, you know, make this, I guess, I want to say make it ethical. It sounds ridiculous, but you know what I mean? The idea of let's dash some ethics on top of this thing that I've done. No, but you know what I mean? Like, how do you do it? Like, what's the thing? If I'm going to do a machine is going to do some ranking on humans, how do we make that so that's okay?
In my opinion, if you use an AI for screening CVs and you have 10 applicants on a job, why are you using this AI? You can easily review the 10 CVs. Now, if you have 300 applicants for 1 job, then you can say to the candidates, there is a tremendous amount of candidatures and I will have to use this AI. Here is how it works. And I promise you that I will be transparent with you.
This is a very interesting point, though, because even if you don't automate stuff, there is a lot of research that shows that people are really affected by the ranking of the results, right? So even when it's just like search results, you know, even if the top one is not good, people will be inclined to click the top one, right? That's just how the human brain works. So this is, even when you don't automate this stuff, it's still, yeah, there's still a lot of responsibility to take there.
No, it's quite often sort of 2 forgotten elements of bias, right? You have automation bias because the computer says so, I'm inclined to believe it, and presentation bias, right? The fact that there is a certain ranking and certain, you know, CVs or candidates are presented above others will make that people are more inclined. So you actually have to sort of train your algorithms and also sort of your UI in such a way that it kind of avoids or mitigates as many of these kind of biases as well. I mean, people tend to think of biases around kind of sex or gender or things like that. But I mean, in our world, these are also 2 very real biases that we have to take into account.
I want to just throw something in. So we talk a lot about automation and automating the entire recruitment process, but obviously we still need the recruiter at the end of the day to make that decision. Where do they, so if you automate the whole process, where should do they only come in at the end? Where should the human element be on within all the automation throughout the process?
I think one of the key principles of the AI Act is transparency, so that the user can understand the reasoning of the system. This is much better achieved if the system doesn't do things in one go, right? If you don't have one model that does an end-to-end prediction, in our specific case, that would, for example, be predict whether a candidate is good for a certain job, right? That you can ask ChatGPT, is this a good candidate for my job? But then you don't have any visibility, right? So the more you restrict the reach, the scope of the models you're using, the more intermediate steps you can check as a human. So I think it's yeah, that's kind of the balance that you need to find, because these LLMs that we have nowadays, they are of course more powerful than any AI we've had before. So we do want to leverage that power, but we also want to make sure that we don't throw away, well, things like transparency and accountability, explainability. These are all technical terms for something different, even though they sound the same. And we don't want to throw that out because this is a very good algorithm, right?
So again, we don't want to talk about use cases, but there's a few use cases that are so interesting. So I want us to just explore these just a bit further. You talked about the prediction side, which I thought was very interesting, Vincent. That was actually something I was going to think about. Like, AI is going to make, we're all, as human beings in recruiting, we are actually trying to make predictions as to whether someone is going to be good or bad at a job. So what's so difficult about machine doing that? That may actually have much better information, access to information. They've got loads more sort of data points to measure and benchmark against. I've only got my own bias to bring into play. So would it not be better to have an AI that's been trained on 1 million data points on who, you know, might be a better or worse candidate for this type of role, and just have it, you know, do that, make that decision? What are our thoughts on that? Are we comfortable with this, or do we think no, a human being needs to intercede, or we shouldn't actually build something that makes these predictions? Is that a bad question, folks, or is it just so dumbfounding?
I think it's a difficult subject, because in my view, I would say that technology can only, if you have a lot of data points, it can only look back at what somebody has done in the past, and that will not at all times accurately predict the future. So yeah, well, the technology may reject someone that might be actually really fit for the future and is in transition to a new position, but based on his past, would be rejected. And that's something that I believe a human would be better in seeing than technology. So yeah, it's a difficult situation, I think.
I do think also here the use case is not by definition off limits for AI, because you're right. If you have a purely objective AI, then this could be better than humans. Right now, we don't have that. We can never prove that our algorithms are better than humans. And by better, in this case, I mean, well, more just, you could say. So they know exactly the right candidates, and they have very good reasons to do that, and they are very fair and balanced. And you know, we don't have those algorithms yet. We have very good algorithms, but we also know they are biased. We also know they have their limitations, right? And as long as we are not there yet, which, well, could take 1 year, 2 year, 10 year, 20 years, I don't know. That's something I'll leave to the futurologists. But I think that is very important to realize.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
I'm also seeing the comment from Mark Grace in the comment sections on the data points and where are these coming from. So if you have an AI screening people and using just data points from all over the internet, are these actually relevant data points to the job that's being offered or the situation? Isn't there a privacy issue? Are you even allowed to check this? So yeah, I think that's a very valid point.
Absolutely.
Talking about this sort of the amount of data, and it kind of leads back to this GDPR sort of data retention aspect. I'm imagining a situation where you have a company that hires a lot of people, there's a lot of data going through that process, and maybe they want to say, you know what, I actually want to train an AI that understands our company culture and gets an idea as to who performs well. Let's match our hiring with who are great performers on, and then maybe use that AI to then identify candidates that come through. But then we've got this, oh, you've got to delete the data after 6 months or something of this nature. Like, how does that work with the data, with the, I guess, I don't know what I'm trying to say. So if an AI has been trained on the data that now needs to be deleted, the training is still within the AI though, isn't it? You can't delete the memory. Is that right? So all we need to do is keep training the AI with more and more data and just have a cycle of deleting every 6 months. I think I've solved my own answer, haven't I?
Yeah. It's not necessarily more data, right? It's fresh data. Anyway.
Yeah. That's right. So that's the way to do it. Very, very interesting. Okay, folks, we're going to keep going because it's obviously a fascinating conversation. You see how many people have stayed on the conversation. We had 0 dropout for all the people who are watching. So thanks for all the questions. We're going to get to them in a second. Remember, use the Q&A function, folks. We're going to lose it in the chat, basically. So if you've got the question you've asked in Q&A in the chat, ping it in the Q&A and we'll go to it at the end of the show. But we always have to take a mini break in the middle of every show. Why? Because Brain Food Live has to come off air at some point. And it's a desperately sad thing if this was a conversation stopping moment for us, because clearly we need to continue this conversation irrespective of whether we're on air or not. So the best way to do this is to make sure you follow all of the panelists that are currently on screen and that you also connect with everyone else who's contributing in this conversation. So why don't you take a moment, grab your LinkedIn URL and share it in the chat stream if you're watching this on Crowdcast. If you're watching this on any of the LinkedIn lives that are out there, just do the same on the thread there, put it in the comments, and then just connect with everyone else who's done the same. Worst thing that is going to happen is that you're going to follow a bunch of people that's really at the leading edge of keeping up to date and connecting us with the legislation. And you'll also connect with 20, 30, 40 people that really care about this topic as well. So further opportunities for you to network and knowledge share from there. Okay, cool. Let's ask a more open question in terms of features that you predict are most likely to fall out of compliance when these frameworks emerge. So, we know we disagree with people chucking stuff out and pushing stuff out, but we are seeing stuff getting pushed out, particularly given the fact we're living in kind of a global internet, right? So there's different territories that have different views as to, I'm pretty certain a lot of US companies are not paying too much attention about EU sort of AI Act. They're just saying, right, we're chumming this out. Okay. So what are the features that you would see, okay, that's probably going to fall out of compliance? Has anybody got any thoughts on that?
Well, one of the key ones, I think, sort of for our industries, because in the AI Act, there's actually sort of 7 or 8 practices that are definitely sort of off limits. And one of them is emotion inference at the workplace. That's if you're in that business, if you're seeing whether your sort of, customer service agent is sitting smiling behind their computer, that's going to be a dead end. That's one of the few sort of very hard lines that we already know is going to be a no-go area.
Come again, Martin, can you dumb this down for me? Emotional inference, what does that mean?
Yeah, so sort of, you have a system with a camera that's pointed at you while you're doing work and seeing like, is someone still smiling? Are they still happy? And if they're not, start sending them little messages, say, hey, cheer up, you want to be on your best behavior when you're talking to our customers, etc. Those kind of systems, are going to be off limit. The famous kind of, social scoring, we all know the stories coming out of China. That's also one that we definitely know kind of off limits.
Okay, what else, folks? Go ahead, Vincent.
No, there's an interesting comment about people aggregators, because in fact, in theory, they should already be off limits with the GDPR. So that's an interesting thing there. I mean, it relates more to the GDPR, I think, than the AI Act.
The very, very popular tool. I mean, when you look at what recruiters demand, so I think these companies are responding to definitely responding to consumer demand, but yet it was always pretty confusing as to how they could do this and stay compliant. I'm assuming that's mainly because they're non-EU businesses, right? I mean, they're headquartered elsewhere. It looks like they're mainly in the US. I mean, there is an idea here that isn't what we're going to be doing in the EU potentially going to be frustrating innovation, that another territory will simply build these products that we in Europe will use anyway. I do believe there was a letter shared actually by somebody today, a lot of signees saying exactly this, saying, guys, we need to actually have some consistency what we're doing, because If we don't, basically other territories, other companies in those territories are going to build this stuff, and we're just going to miss out on the value. Is that generally where? Is that, do you think that's going to happen? We're just generally going to end up using, US tools, I guess, because EU is going to be shaking their heads here. Like, that's why are you so confident?
Oh, no.
No, it's a tough question, but the law is not so difficult to comply with if you bring the economy and the ways to comply with it. So obviously, a US-based company that wants to put and market an AI system in the EU market can do it, but just have the volunteer to, just use and comply with the law. And sorry, but yes, it's.
No, I mean, I mentioned this in the chat a little bit earlier, right? Like, it's this whole argument of innovation or regulation is going to stifle innovation. I mean, there's amazing advancements in the areas of automotive, of pharma, of aviation, a whole bunch of other industries, that have taken place in Europe, from the likes of Airbus, think of any of the big sort of German car manufacturers, all of those industries, banking, insurance, etc. They've all been, regulated for decades and decades and decades. And I think the one thing that we're seeing is, for whatever reason, as a world, we've decided to give software makers a free pass on meeting a lot of kind of regulatory requirements. You think of CrowdStrike. Like, a couple of weeks ago, their outage affected many, many industries, created billions and billions of damage, and their responsibility, due to the clever way they wrote their legal terms, is close to zero. Like, how can you do that much damage to the world, that much damage to many corporates, many governments, many institutions, and not be responsible for it? If I buy a car, it breaks down, I take it to the dealership, and I expect them to repair it for at no cost to me, and give it back to me with a sort of bottle of wine on the side for my pain. And yet we've always given kind of software makers a free pass, and I think that's what we're seeing a little bit in some of the grumblings of Meta. You've seen Apple saying, "Oh, we're not going to release Apple Intelligence on the EU market due to some regulatory concerns." You see Meta come out and say, "Oh, Llama, I think it's 3.1, is not going to be made available." It's all this kind of like, it feels to me a little bit like a bunch of small petulant children throwing their toys out of the pram, like, "Oh, we're upset at you. You have rules now. We're going to stop delivering to your customer." Ultimately, it's a super big affluent market here in the EU. Companies from outside of the EU are going to keep wanting to serve European customers. And I think this also offers a great opportunity for European companies, like the ones represented here on this call, to offer kind of the human-centric, responsible, ethical alternatives. And I think, that's ultimately also what people want. I mean, people are shocked to find out what's actually happening with all the data they've left on Facebook many years, and how it's now being trained to, or used to train their models. People never sort of considered that when in 2007 they started, putting pictures of their family get-togethers there, right? And that's, I think, what a lot of this stuff is about. As I mentioned in the beginning, AI is not going to be prohibited, other than a few very specific use cases that are mentioned. And the rest, like Thibaut mentioned as well, jump through a few hoops and the European market is yours. And it feels a little bit silly that so many of them are protesting at this moment.
Let's talk about those hoops at this point, guys. So I'm a product maker. Or I want to be. Let's say I want to create software. Of course, I'm going to put AI in this and all this, but I'm just like concerned. Like, what do I need to do? What are the things that I do need to do to ensure that I have a product that's compliant with the EU AI Act?
That's a simple question with a hard answer. I think the most important part is you need to be conscious of what you're doing, and you make sure that you explain what you are doing, and that the people that you are selling your product understand what it's doing, how it works, and the base, so that it's understandable for people that are using it. I think that's the bottom line, bare minimum. In order to make sure that you are explainable, that you still can explain what's happening.
Okay, so this actually, for the lay people may not get this. So essentially, explainability is one of the main principles, correct? Which means that, no? What do you mean, Martin?
No, so I mean, yeah, again, I don't want to make this too technical. Explainability as such is not in sort of the EU AI Act, but I very much concur with Jaap. It's one of those key principles that if you want to do AI ethically, you want to make sure that your system is explainable, but as such, explainability isn't kind of codified in the EU AI Act. Aspects like transparency, and there's a slight nuance between the two, is people can also actually ask you for an explanation, but the actual kind of technical understanding of explainability in sort of software terms isn't in there. It's primarily a whole bunch of fairly technical requirements around having like a risk management system, giving insight into sort of like your training data, making sure that your system comes with documentation and instructions for you so that the people who use your system can do it well. There are certain demands around like cyber security and those kind of areas. So it's actually fairly formal, fairly technical standards, roughly, that you have to meet.
I like that. Oh, sorry, you want to go, Thibaut?
Oh, thank you. Also, for your questions, I have to answer by more questions on the technical side. So, do you want to use AI in Europe? If yes, then the act applies. So after, if you want to build an AI, will you plug an LLM like ChatGPT or Claude or stuff like this? If yes, you are in another category that is called the general purpose AI model. And after, if you're just developing in-house your AI, okay, fair enough, you will be in AI systems. And after, you would map every project of AI software you will be developing. Also, having the date of entry in the market, because you have some exemption regime. If you don't touch and you don't bring significant changes to your system, if it's already on the market, you have some parts of the act that are applying August 1st, 2025. That's for if you are using an LLM. If you are not using an LLM and developing in-house, it will be August 1st, 2026. So you have a lot of questions like this. So if you use an LLM and you choose Mistral that is open source, it will be another regime of obligations. So basically you have to cooperate with the product to gather all the technical details, even the power calculation of your model, because you have some categories of power calculation. And if your model is too strong, you will go in another category that will be even more complicated. So you have to ask a lot of questions. And after this, when you have all the elements, define your obligation and start to creating the documentation. And after, that's right, you comply.
Fortunately, a lot of people a lot smarter than we are have created all these beautiful decision trees. So the likes of Thibaut and myself can just go from little box to little box and trying to figure it out. But I guess, I mean, one thing to, for this audience to understand, like if you have all AI systems, 85 to 90% are not governed whatsoever by the AI Act. They're on the market, your spell checker or word predictor that's in Gmail or something like that, completely irrelevant. And there's sort of all the chatbots that all of us use, as long as, you understand that you're engaging with the chatbot. If it's not clear, and if, you sometimes see that on websites where, there's a pretty picture of like a customer service agent that pop up, how can I help you? You actually have to start disclosing that you're talking to a chatbot and not an actual human being. So, that gets us to just a small category of these high-risk systems. The only unfortunate thing for many people in this audience is that the systems that are used for recruitment and for selection and for HR decision making, those all fall in that high-risk category, and that's why it's caused quite a stir in our industry. But overall, if you look at all AI systems on the market, just a very tiny percentage that's actually being regulated here.
Okay, very, very good. Folks, there's loads more questions I've got, but I don't want to dominate the chat. We've got loads of questions in the Q&A, so I'm going to switch to them now. Friends, last chance to ask questions to this wonderful panel. Stick them in the Q&A. We're just going to go through them one by one. Let's see how we go. Okay, I'm just going to read these out. So this one from Nicola. Nicola's saying, what advice would you give to people looking to utilize AI more or want to choose tech that has AI functionality, how do you determine which is compliant and responsible? So this is like from a bias perspective. Like, do we assume that the tool is going to be compliant? Do we care, like, is the liability on the builder, or is the liability on me as the user or a buyer? Or how do I actually make that decision? Any thoughts on that? Anybody want to give this a go? One answer only, I think, because of time.
I think it would be a good start if your AI supplier is aware and working on this topic. That would be a good start. Then again, the standards come in. Probably there will be at some point a certification for adhering to these standards, which can be a more concrete way to prove that you are compliant.
Yeah, so I think basically interrogate them about what they're doing about staying on compliance, and if they can't give a fluent answer, then that's probably some sort of concern. Or they don't have a strategy.
More questions.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, moving on. We've got this one from Gabriele. Gabriele is saying, okay, would comparative research to assess bias in recruiting using or not using AI systems be enough to clear a product for use? So basically, I think what Gabriele is saying, hey, listen, here's an AI tool, here's a non-AI tool. I'm going to compare the two for bias. And actually, the non-AI tool is more biased than the AI tool. Therefore, that means AI is good to go. Is that right or not?
It's a huge debate, but humans are full of cognitive bias, and it's crazy how we are just driving our decisions because it is reminding you something a good memory of the past or something like this. It's crazy how the human is biased. So if one day we create the objective AI with an objective data set and with a fair model, maybe we will end discrimination at job and stuff like this. This is the hope. But it's a huge debate. To answer precisely to Gabriele, it's not closed, and I think we will have some years of reflections to solve this problem.
Yeah, I think that
one thing I'll point
towards
is, to just maybe a quick addition. Look at the Find HR project, financed by the EU, a couple of research universities. They're really working hard to see if they can come to a set of metrics to kind of test for bias and to sort of apply those to AI systems to achieve the goal that Thibaut was just talking about.
Yeah, very good. Okay, here's the question again. This is from Christoph Metz. Christoph is saying, okay, how should companies handle their obligations to inform applicants and employees when AI is involved in decision making? What do companies consider need to consider regarding transparency and explainability requirements? So yeah, let's say it's an employee thing. We're going to generate some performance metrics or something, or we're going to have suggestions as to what potential career paths this person should go in or whatnot. Does anybody have any advice as to how we communicate that we're using technology? Any like best practices emerging, or is that too early?
I think that's quite early for the best practices, and I think how companies should handle their obligation is be transparent. Communicate basically just clearly communicate what you are doing. Make sure that everybody is informed.
I think, and I'm not an expert at all, but I think it's possible to make it in fact, you tell me, guys, is it okay to put like a generalized disclaimer at the front of the process, and say, hey, we're using a number of tools that have AI decision making. It's going to support us to make this call. Do you confirm consent? Yes, no, and the person consents, and in you go, and off, and you're good to go. Would that be sufficient, do you think, or not?
Legally,
I think
it's a different question.
It also depends on the kind of people that are responding. If the disclaimer is understandable to them, it might be. But if they're not, or they're forced into the system, and there's no other way or no opt-out option, then it might not be.
Yeah, I think maybe providing the option, the opt-in, like don't opt them in automatically, but provide them to say, hey, listen, do you want to opt into this approach, which, you could sell it on efficiency. It's like faster because it probably is faster. You can even say it's fairer, all this type of stuff. And then they opt in and off you go. And the ones that don't opt in, you have to go through maybe a parallel process or secondary process that doesn't involve those technologies, but there's a caveat to that in the sense that maybe there'll be some delay in process or something of that nature, or they would then be subject to, let's say, human bias. So we might, the candidates themselves might surprise us because they may actually volunteer to say yes more than we think. Okay, another one from Gabriele. Are AI assessments by picking visual cues in videos? This is the old higher view story, isn't it? So I'm recording a video interview. I detect this pupil dilation is like clearly signifying this individual is lying to me. We're going to reject him on that basis. Is that okay?
The category of biometrics and the use thereof is probably one of the hardest subjects under the AI Act, because depending on how you use it, it falls into different categories. So yeah, I'm not going to dive into it in detail, but tricky. Let's just call it that.
Does anyone know the law about lie detectors? Forget about AI. Has anyone done lie detectors? Does anyone know? I'm asking you in the panel and the audience, like, has anyone actually wired someone up to do an interview? I'd love to see that. All right. Let's move on. Part of the problem in recruiting is that candidates also use AI to generate applications. How do we address this? So this is basically candidate usage of AI. How do we address the usage of this? The candidates seem free to go, right? I don't think they're governed by this in the same way, or are they? Like, can we hit them with a lawsuit saying you have generated it? No. Okay, so they're free to go. It's only the EU AI Act only applies to corporate entities rather than individuals, correct?
No, it's more about sort of who's actually built or deployed the system, kind of.
Okay.
All right, Landon, the answer is going to be announced in about 2 weeks' time, because I'm going to be doing another webinar with our good friends at Arctic Shores where we're updating candidate usage of generative AI and what best policy is to that. So go and sign up to that, and we'll hopefully, I wouldn't say have answers, but at least we'll be pouring our way forward.
A serious answer to Landon is actually that this is a tricky one for our industry, because we have candidates who are writing cover letters and CVs using generative AI, which companies like ours then use AI to review. So it's like, are we still going to go through all those hoops, or is this actually, as we were discussing earlier, where human interaction becomes more important? Or you look at completely other kinds of skills outside of AI, maybe more blockchain, verified credentials. That's something that, Randstad, among others, is participating in a project to say, okay, if you actually want to make sure that someone has a certain degree or diploma or a certain work experience, have sort of like a blockchain-based, verifiable digital credential issued by the company they work for or the education institution that you can actually verify. And it doesn't matter then how pretty you make your CV with generative AI, we can actually verify that someone has the skills or has the experience that they claim they have. So it's not AI related, not covered by the EU AI Act, but it is something else that's kind of exciting and happening in the technical space.
All right. Really interesting question from James. I believe I understand this as follows. So this is related to employers using AI to screen CVs. And James has said that this makes it into a high risk category. However, what if the candidates use AI themselves, and therefore we're saying that the candidate has inherently lowered their risk of unfairness by them using AI in response to what they see? Does the risk classification move in that basis? I mean, this is obviously, we can't answer this, but what do you think, just generally as a with that weird scenario?
I think both can apply, because the transparency obligations of the Chapter 5 that we oftenly correlate to the medium risk can also apply to a non-medium risk. So you would have the obligations of the high risk AI system plus the transparency obligations. But to take this information carefully, because it's still hard to answer and affirm something.
Yeah.
What should be your take?
I'm not entirely sure I fully understand the question, but if it is sort of that, can applicants, by the way they act, kind of reduce the risk level or risk category? The answer is no, because you have to look at the intended use of the system. So if there's a system that screens applicants, that's a system that's intended, or its purpose is to be used in kind of the recruitment selection process, then it just gets the high risk category label, and there's no such thing as kind of like risk acceptance or something by applicants. You just have to meet, as the builder or provider of that system, the obligations for high risk AI systems.
Okay, cool. All right, folks, let's finish off with a quick round of recommendations from our panelists here. For people who are, we've talked about building software, but let's talk about the buyers of software, users of software. What's the advice you want to give to someone who is in that boat? They're a recruiter, they're using it. It's basically, a lot of the times we don't feel as if we're making particularly considered decisions, because the software we're buying today, tomorrow they're rolling out a solution, a feature, and suddenly we have it. And here we go. Like, do we just roll with that? Is it on the, in fact, no. What is your advice to the recruiters using tools? Is there anything that they need to be mindful of as we enter this AI-enabled world? Let's go round robin. Martin, let's go with you first. What are your thoughts?
Sure. I think, we answered it in respect of an earlier question. Ask questions of the vendor. What problem are we looking to solve with AI? What's the use case? What kind of data has been used in training development? What kind of outputs does the system? So ask very critical questions of your vendor. If you're dissatisfied with the answer, if they're being a bit coy about it, then it's probably not the vendor you want to go with.
Cool. How about you, Jaap? What's your advice to a recruiter currently watching this show?
I fully agree with Martin on this one, but I would also say check the roadmap and see where they are aiming to go, because that can also give a clear indication on how they approach AI.
Yeah, very good. As for the roadmap, guys, I like this. Thibaut, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, absolutely agree with Martin and Jaap. And also I would please include or ask to your DPO or to your legal counsel or to the person that is specialized in this, because they can spot a big red flag that maybe you don't spot because you did not read the law, and it can help a lot to avoid mistakes.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. And finally, a word to you, Vincent. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are, of course, I agree with all that's been said. I just want to add that I think one of the great side effects of this AI Act is that we are doing this podcast now, or this episode now, and we are all talking about it. And people who listen to this are maybe a bit more aware of things they need to be careful with when using AI. I mean, that in itself has value, of course.
Yeah, and let me speak on behalf of the audience, everyone, and thank everyone for on screen here for sharing your knowledge and the education. Super, super valuable. So thank you, Martin Woodward. Thank you, Jaap Kersten. Thank you, Thibaut Allard. Thank you, Vincent Aslot. Really, really valuable session, folks. Really appreciate it. Have a good weekend. I'll say goodbye to you now. Chloe, you and I stay on stage. We're going to wrap this.
Sure.
Thanks, everybody. And thanks, everyone, for watching. It's been great to see you all. We've got, I think, one of these shows where oftentimes you're not sure whether it would be popular or not. But I'm really pleased that people have stayed on and kept watching, which is great. So we're going to be... we'll be back next week, folks. We're going to be talking about hiring manager self-serve. Like, how do you create a recruitment approach where you are decentralizing recruitment and pushing it more responsibility to the line? How can recruiters enable this rather than constantly centralizing everything? It's going to be a fascinating conversation, because as we need to do more with less, one of the ways to do that is actually disperse the effort back into the line. Make sure you sign up for that show. It's going to be on same time next week. Okay, that's about it. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Thank you.
That was all right. That was all right, wasn't it, Chloe?
Yep.
It's quite interesting, I thought.
Absolutely.
more interesting than it's
very much so.
It's always fascinating when you've got like people who know their domain, you know?
Yeah. And then we sit in the back waiting. No, it was really interesting. And they really do know what they're talking about. It's very cool.
On your side, I wonder whether sort of the conversation has bled into marketing in any way, because obviously recruiters were using there's all kinds of, but marketing also has this challenge, hasn't it? Where what's the chat happening within that industry, Chloe?
I mean, the use of AI for everything? I mean, coming up with content creation, everything around that. And I mean, even data privacy, scrubbing lists, putting it into ChatGPT, the same. It comes down to a privacy thing. So there's a lot of tools that are out there. It's definitely helping from a like an automation point of view, and we're getting more stuff done. But is it? Yeah, what are we using it for? You're sort of just using it for everything. So yeah, it's there's a lot happening in terms of legislation and things like that. I'm not too sure, but anything that could be misinformation, I think that's also what we've got to be super, super careful about. And it's easier to spread that and easier to believe things.
Yeah. I think marketing has probably been. Did I read somewhere that marketing as a function has generally been like a heavier user of Gen AI, particularly than any other department?
Absolutely.
Content creation and stuff. Yeah.
But you've also, I mean, there was that whole, I think it was Nike or something recently where they did the AI video of, it was a AI generated human. So using that within marketing as well. So where do you draw the line? It's not even people anymore. It's actually AI generated videos of people.
Yeah, it's going to be, I mean, I'm going to experiment with some of this myself. It's going to be quite freaky, but we've got to embrace it because it's not like one thing is true though. I think that you got to find a way that the human is very conspicuous, because I do believe we resonate more with the human being, even though I think we could, even though I think we'll have a different type of relationship with AI. I mean, I think we could totally make friends with them, no doubt about that. But it'll be different to the qualities of human interaction. Anyway, Chloe, what are you doing this weekend? Anything interesting?
My parents are here, so lots of touristy things.
Amazing. What's the number one tourist thing you're going to take your folks on to do?
Oh my God, good question. I always take them to the little lake near our house. It's so beautiful. Just sit on the grass, have a picnic, swim. Enjoy the last few bits of the warmth.
I was going to say the weather is going to hold up, so that's going to be a great weekend. So, listen, Chloe, you enjoy it. Thanks for joining and helping me out with all this. Amazing.
Good.
Yeah, you take care of it yourself, and yeah, we'll catch up. We'll catch up in a couple of days in any case.
Yes, and good luck with all the events happening next week.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. See you later.
Okay. Bye.